Welcome to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kibler, your net profit CFO, helping business owners like you grow their net profit one episode at a time. And now your host, Ryan Kibler.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Net Profit Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Kibler, the Net Profit CFO. Today, I've got a very good friend with me, Chris Marshall. He is with Verified Backups. I'm excited to talk with him and have him on the show. Chris is a lifelong entrepreneur and has a background with programming and technology and computers. And today we are going to be learning more about his company, Verified Backups, and how he can come in and really help you make sure all of your systems are backed up and in the right way. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Chris, I gave a short background there, a little bit about you. Would love to give you the opportunity just here in the beginning, tell my audience a little bit about where you're at now and kind of how you got to where you are.
Sure. So I've been a programmer for 32 years, since I was 10. And what I noticed along the way is every so often a client would have an issue with their backups. And maybe they got ransomware. In one case, they were struck by lightning. And the data wasn't there and the backups weren't there. And so I created a company called Verified Backups to make sure that a company's most critical databases are backed up and that those backups are workable.
Love that. Love that. And now today, from our first conversation, you actually have a patent around the system that you use and how you're actually verifying that the backup happened, correct?
Sure. That's correct. I have a U.S. patent. It was granted 3.5 years ago. And so what we're doing with Verified Backups is something that Microsoft is not doing and Veeam is not doing. Name any big backup player. We're doing something unique to make sure that our people are protected.
Yes. And I want to dive into that because when I think as a business owner, right, or as a small business owner, when you say, Microsoft is not doing this with your backup, right? Probably strikes fear in a few small business owners because, the kind of, I'll say they're the big guys, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
We entrust them that, if we're with them and we're paying for a service that they've got us covered and that we're getting what we're expecting. And then to hear like, well, that might not exactly be the case is probably a little bit scary. So dive in here a little bit and kind of explain to us what you mean by that.
Sure. Well, I didn't come on your podcast to terrify anybody, but at the same time, it's one of those things. It's like, okay, so I'm 60 years old. I went to see a cardiologist this year and I got some great information. It turns out everything was fine. But if it wasn't fine, I would still want to know because I would need to know if I need to adjust my lifestyle or quit running or, do whatever. And so some things are good to know, even if you're not sure you want to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I learned about backups is most company owners, perhaps close to all company owners, have no idea if last night's backup of their critical data really worked. And the reason is lots of things can go wrong. You could have a virus on your computer. You could have ransomware. You could have been affected by a fire or a flood or lightning or, all manner of things. Your server that does the backups could have run out of disk space. And so all of these things can keep an otherwise normal process from working normally. And the fact is, there's only one way to know if your backup worked, and simply you have to restore it. So there's an industry leader. And what they said is the only way to know if a given backup worked is to attempt to restore that backup. So if I'm backing up every day, so we're recording this on a Monday, the only way to know if Sunday's backup worked is to restore that backup in a separate location. You can't restore it from where it came because it'll overwrite changes you've made since then. The only way to know if last Thursday night's backup worked is to restore it. And that's time consuming. That takes resources. A company would need extra hard drive space. And so because of the difficulty of time and process, companies just assume that the backup worked. And we don't like assume as a business strategy. We also don't like hope and pray as a business strategy. Those are good things for a Sunday morning, but those aren't a good way to run your company. So once I realized that most business owners have no idea if their backup worked, I set out to solve that problem.
Yeah, and just to kind of back up here and kind of lay the groundwork a little bit, lay the foundation. I mean, we're really talking about just all of your data here, right? I mean, this could be everything from accounting data to payroll data to if you have security cameras, we're talking about like security footage, like we're talking about just everything that is on your server actually backed up somewhere else.
Well, correct. And what we focus on at Verified Backups is I tell people, I'm not really worried about your summer vacation photos because people will store those on the network for some reason.
Sure.
I'm not really worried about your Excel spreadsheets because if you lose a spreadsheet, you can reconstruct it. You've probably printed it out. You can create it again. It's not going to destroy your company. If you lose your accounting software and suddenly you don't know who owes you money and you don't know who you owe money to, you don't know who you've paid in payroll this year, you don't know what taxes are due, that can either hamper or destroy your company, depending on the size and the amount of information that's lost. So we're really focused on accounting, inventory, CRM, ERP, things like that. Payroll databases, estimates if you're a contractor or a construction company. It's really we call them databases. They're data storage processes that are always busy and always adding more information.
Yeah. And I think, as a small business owner, I mean, just rewind the last couple of minutes here and just really think about the systems that you have. What does it look like for your business if you lost them? How crippling would that be? What's really the cost of losing stuff like that? I mean, in some cases for payroll and taxes and stuff like that, I mean, that could be really just detrimental. So I
Sure.
love the focus that you guys have going after that really, really important data.
And there's two questions. One is, can you get it back from a backup at all? And two is, if you can, how quickly can you do it? And I do have some examples we can share. We talked about that company that found out the hard way
Yeah.
that their backups were not what they wanted to be. So,
yeah. And so with you guys, you are like essentially you're really restoring the backup from an outside location so that you're verifying that it actually worked. Do I have that right?
correct. That is correct. So, what we do is we do every day what will have to be done if you have a crisis. So, if you have a crisis, the first thing you'll do is panic, maybe raise your blood pressure, things like this. And then you'll call your IT person if you have in-house IT, or you'll call your IT outsourced company. And a lot of companies these days outsource their IT, which is great. And you'll call them in a panic and you say, oh my God, we're missing our payroll, or we're missing our estimating data, we're missing our ERP, these critical things that run your whole company. And that will begin a process where that person or those people will look through your backups and make a determination as to which backup, if any, can be used to bring you back to normal. And then that starts a process. It's not as easy as pushing a button. It's not as easy as just flipping a switch, but they will start that process and the process will take the time that it takes. So two things, we want to make sure you can get your data back. We want to make sure it's really quick.
Yeah, so I picked up on something you said there, which is, your IT person will go through your backups and kind of figure out which one of them, if any,
Right.
will be able to help you get your data back. I think I'm going to kind of tee you up for this, but I know you've got a couple of stories that things without having a verified backup didn't work out so well for the client.
Sure. So I have a large client in Illinois. They have 350 employees. Actually, they're up to 400 employees now. And several years ago, I got the panicked phone call. They had a virus that erased all of their hard drives. So literally every computer was blank. So it wasn't a ransom situation. It was just some hacker out there wanting to be destructive. So they said, well, Chris, we've got this payroll system. Can you come in and restore it from the backups? And so I got to their office pretty quickly and discovered that their payroll had not backed up correctly in 9 months. And so what was happening was every day it was backing up a previous copy And so their most up-to-date backups were still 9 months out of date. And what made it more difficult for them to understand this is they were getting a happy email every day from their cloud provider that the backup worked. So every day you get a message, dear such and such, your backup worked correctly. And then there I was, the bearer of bad news, to say, no, this hasn't backed up in 9 months. And that was catastrophic for them. What they had to do was set up a manual payroll entry system and bring senior managers in after work hours to make 42,000 manual payroll entries in their system so that they would be caught up, so that they would have taxes and all of these things. That is not a great outcome. And the problem is their system was making these backups every day and tossing them out to the cloud. Nobody was on the receiving end testing that at all. And again, that's one of the events that led to the formation of verified backups.
And so when you say that the most recent backup was 9 months prior, so basically like 9 months prior, what happened was since then, the backup was a copy of that day's file.
Right.
So the days moving forward in between now and like 9 months ago, I know it didn't happen 9 months ago, but pretend that it did in between now and 9 months ago, every day was a copy from 9 months ago, and it wasn't anything brand new.
That's correct. And so they had 9 months worth of copies of the same thing.
And then that means that all of your changes since the last 9 months, none of those were taken into account. And so thus the kind of, I'll call it a horror story of, oh my gosh, all of our senior execs have to stay after work and start making all these entries for their department.
Right. But this kind of thing happens more than people realize. And like I've said, fire, flood, natural disaster. One of my clients was struck by lightning. Actually, it wasn't the client, fortunately, it was their server. And the server was totally black inside and charred. And so they weren't able to do anything. Fortunately, we had a backup that was running every day that I had created, got them up and running as soon as they had a new server, because like I said, the one they had was no good. Something that people don't also think about is employee error or employee malice. So quick story, a company in England fired a director. They forgot to turn off her computer access, so she went home, spent the next 24 hours deleting every single thing off of their online backup. They used one of these Microsoft online services. And the service assumed that since she was a director, she really, really wanted those things to be deleted. And so they were deleted on both sides. So the owner of the company comes in the next day. Long story short, he spent $120,000 trying to get his data back, and in the end had to shut his company because they were so crippled by having no more invoices, no more lists of customers, no more accounting data, et cetera, et cetera. So employee malice is a thing, and even employee error. I get one more quick story, I guess.
Yeah.
I got a call last week from a company. She had done a procedure in her accounting system that threw everything off balance, and she realized she had typed something wrong. The system didn't stop her, and things were all out of whack for fourth quarter tax reporting. So she called tech support, and tech support said, well, there's nothing we can do. So she called me and said, hey, I've screwed this up. Can we possibly get this back from the backup? And I said, sure. So within a few minutes, we pulled the correct backup from the night before she made these changes, reinstated that, and then did what her tech support could not do, which had her back up and running. And again, the time was, 20 minutes or something. So there are so many ways that you can lose your data, and we want to make sure we cover you for all of those contingencies.
Yeah, love that. I think, this is something that maybe is not top of mind for a lot of business owners until they experience it and have something that doesn't go right. Sure.
Well, I used the example of me going to the cardiologist, and if my kids are listening to this podcast, they'll be like, Dad, quit with the examples and the analogies. But, lots of people get in trouble every year because they thought nothing about how their heart was doing until it was a crisis. And once it's a crisis, it could end up being too late. So this is something that business owners don't need to be paranoid about, but it's questions that need to be answered. And the simple question is my backup working, and how do I know?
Yep. Yeah, and Chris, I think that's a really great point, and that's what really drove me to have you on the show because
Yeah.
the work that you guys do, it's again from a separate location. You
Mhm.
guys are verifying every single day that
Right.
yes, the backup is working. Yes, we could restore this file if we needed to.
Mhm.
And then after that, sending a confirmation email back to the company, not just
Right.
a yes, we've got it and it's working and it's not actually verified, which is what has happened at some other companies.
Sure. And the one thing we do, so we restore the data offsite, and then we actually run a date scan on all of the data and look at the most recent activity. Because again, we had that scenario where the company was 9 months out of date. And so we'll send them a letter saying, Dear sir, your payroll database has been recovered. And we'll say today is October 15th, as an example. We see activity through October 14th. That is what I call a verified backup. I know now that that data can be recovered because I've already recovered it. So if you
Yep.
call me, if you're my client, Ryan, and you call me and say, hey, I just got a ransom notice, I know that last night's backup will save you because it's already been recovered and we already know it's current. So you may lose from whatever you backed up last night. We've run this at like 10 o'clock at night up until now, but that's not going to put you out of business. That's going to be simply re-entering some journal entries or general ledger entries or whatever you're doing in your accounting. And then, poof, you're caught up.
So if you've got a company that runs payroll maybe just once a week, and let's just say that they only make changes on
Yeah.
Fridays, most of your emails are going to reflect that, and it might be several days, since activity has actually happened or since activity is actually made. But that either way, that activity date should align with the last time that entries were actually made and the data was actually updated. Is that right?
That's correct. And what happens is even if you run payroll once a week, typically when I see an accounting company, they're entering payroll every day. So on Tuesday, they're entering Monday's payroll so that on Friday, they won't have to enter the whole week at once.
Yep.
And
Sure.
especially this client with 400 employees, they're doing a full payroll entry every single day for the prior workday.
Yeah, like with everybody's
So
hours.
there's always activity.
Yep, like with
Yeah.
everybody's hours and things like that. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. That definitely makes sense.
Yeah. It's backups are not a topic of fun conversation at a dinner party,
Sure.
but when that accounting company called me last week and I had them up and running in a few minutes, they thought that was the best thing since sliced bread. And spare tires are the same way. And, AEDs, all these things that we depend on to support us. This is just another area of critical interest that the business owner needs to think about.
Yep. Yeah, for me as a finance person, I mean, I just immediately go to what is your opportunity cost, number
Yeah.
one, for losing data like this, then what's your real cost that you're
Mhm.
actually paying your employees, again, if you've got to catch up 9 months of payroll data, you're actually paying your employees, your senior execs, and not to mention that they've got to stay after work and not have time with their families. That's kind of that's not even measurable cost. I mean, you could really make the argument that there's times where some of these bad things could happen and your cost is almost endless.
Right. And it could be endless because every year some number of companies shut down
Yep,
and they're just done. And that impacts their employees. It impacts the community. It impacts the revenue. You know, a lot of companies are supportive of charities. And so if the company's gone, all of those other things fall by the wayside as well.
for sure. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I highly recommend, for my audience, definitely do a little bit of research with the systems that you've got. Really, I love the questions that you asked. Is our data backed up and can we quickly get to it? Right? Those
Right.
are two really, really important questions. And I highly, highly recommend for all of my audience, really be looking into these things. Make sure your data is covered. Chris, I know you have, special offer for my audience
Yeah.
at the podcast and everybody that listens to the Net Profit podcast. I want to give you an opportunity to share that here.
Well, thank you. So our pricing is very reasonable at verified backups because we know that companies need to do this, but have so many other needs. So we're offering a discount which will apply when we talk. We're offering a discount for any listener of this podcast to start up with the service, and that discount will carry you for a whole year. So it's not just like a 1-week discount, it's a serious thing. And that'll be as a courtesy to Ryan and any of his listeners.
Love that. And for my audience, again, highly recommend look into the systems that you've got. If they're not doing what you need, reach out to Chris and get connected with him. Chris, where is the best place for my audience to go to get connected with you and start working with you?
Sure. So our website is www.verifiedbackups.com. Just like it sounds, there's no hyphenation. That's a great way to start because you can request a free consultation, and at no charge, like it says, we'll discuss your situation and see what your needs are and if there's a fit. And if there's not a fit, we'll let you know. But if there is a fit, it'll be at a discount.
Love that. Greatly appreciate that. And again, highly recommend connect with Chris. Obviously, he's got the patents and got the systems to really make sure your data is backed up and that you're taken care of. Don't be a company that's unprepared and then finds out the hard way. That would be my best advice.
Yeah. Well, that's my advice too. And this is something that once you have a service that's really monitoring your backups every day, you can kind of quit worrying because somebody else is checking it for you. And I just want to say a little bit about testing, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So we live in a world where everything is tested. So when you turn on the car, it tests some things about the brakes. It tests the oil. It tests the tire pressure. It tests the engine. When you get on a commercial jet, that jet has been inspected within the last few days. And nobody would fly on a jet that had been inspected a year ago. You know, if you have a heart attack at work and they have one of those AED machines that can save your life, those are even inspected to make sure that they're workable, you know, on a routine basis. But then, so we demand testing in everything. And then we run a company that's 10 or 50 or 100 million a year with no testing of our backups. And so this ought to be in your testing mindset, in your testing cycle, just like any of those other things I discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And, you know, as you mentioned, some of the big services, again, not to throw them under the bus, but they're not testing.
Right.
They're not verifying. So,
No.
you know, it's very possible that you've hired someone for this service and you're not getting tested and they're not really, they can't really recover your data, or it's not all the way up to date, just like some of the stories that you've shared here today.
Right. And we always come into a company as a secondary line of defense backup. You know, you have 2 braking systems in your car. If you cut the brake line, you can stop with the emergency brake. It may be funny, but you can. So we never come in and say, hey, you should get rid of your backup. We say, let's assume that your backup is working, even though it's not being tested. Let's add a secondary backup that is being tested every night. And between the two of those, you'll always have good data.
Love it. Love it. I think that's a great thing to do.
Thank you.
Chris, I want to thank you for taking the time and thank you for coming on the show and sharing with my audience. Again, I think, you know, this is really important to me as a finance person, you know, making sure that you've got around good data and having backed up data. It's, you know, again, really important to me. And I definitely understand if you're without 9 months of payroll data, how crippling that could be to a company. Again, I just want to thank you for taking the time and coming on the show today and sharing with me, sharing with my audience. I greatly appreciate that.
Ryan, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to some good conversations with some of your listeners, and we'll get you all squared away.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for listening. And until next time, go accelerate your profits. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kimler. Make sure to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to check the show notes for our guest contact information and to connect with Ryan on his website, netprofitcfo.com.